Godega? Bodega? What are we talking about here? What is a bodega? And why were you passionate about bringing this concept to Omaha?
Yeah. Well, Godega is actually, it's a Spanish word for wine cellar. But it's really evolved over the years into being these like convenience stores, primarily in larger cities.
Hey there, Omaha. Welcome into another episode of Restaurant Hoppen. I'm your host, Dan Hoppen, and in big cities like New York, you are going to find bodegas on just about every corner. And these small shops are like part convenience store, part coffee shop, part supermarket. And if the concept sounds unfamiliar, that's because we don't really have a lot of these in Omaha, at least until my guest today brought it to fruition. With me is the co-founder of Godega, Nate Flick.
Hey.
Nate, welcome to the show.
Hey, excited to be here.
Okay, so let's just start off from a real high level, just in case somebody's listening to this and they're like, Godega? Bodega? What are we talking about here? What is a bodega? And why were you passionate about bringing this concept to Omaha?
Yeah. Well, Godega is actually, it's a Spanish word for wine cellar. But it's really evolved over the years into being these like convenience stores, primarily in larger cities. And bringing it to Omaha really just came from myself living and working downtown and feeling like I would get off work and there was nowhere to grab a frozen pizza and a six-pack of beer, and just like go home or anything like that. So, once COVID happened and everything shut down, we really started to have some time to like flush out the idea and the concept and bring it here to Omaha.
So when did this idea start percolating in your mind?
2020, and then we opened February of 2022.
Okay. So pretty quick turnaround. At least considering we went through COVID times there.
Yeah.
And the interesting, one of the many interesting things about your business is you guys are open from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. So you are serving everything from coffee and breakfast sandwiches to people grabbing a pint of ice cream going home at night or grabbing a cocktail. Like, that is a huge audience to serve. What made you say we need to be open all day? We need to be convenience for all people. Even if you were just open from 4 to 10 or whatever, and people were grabbing stuff on the way home, that would be a welcome addition and a valuable thing. But you said no. We want to be the whole day, all night. Why?
At the end of the day, in our core, like we are a convenience store, and it's not very convenient if it's closed. So we do want to be that place from like morning to night, the place to get your coffee and the place to get your wine and ice cream after work. And so that's really where it came from.
How have you seen Godega create community? Because that's something that I noticed. Going back to your social media, you had some quotes about like, hey, we see people out on the street. We know them by name now. We see, friendships form. How does that happen inside Godega?
Yeah. I really feel like corner stores and neighborhoods can be like the heartbeat of the community, the neighborhood, the people. People connect there. They run into each other all the time. It brings people from all sorts of walks of life. So I think that's kind of also the frequency of customer, like when we see him in the morning and see him again maybe at lunch and see him at evening, really helped kind of like build that sense of community for us.
That's a dedicated customer if they're coming in 3 times a day.
Sometimes it's just for a bottle of water, or sometimes it's a sandwich, or a pack of gum. So,
and I should note now, you've got the original location was in the Old Market. That's the one that opened in 2022. And then just earlier this year in 2025, you opened your second location in Exarban. So that's very exciting. Congratulations.
Thanks.
But looking back at that original, you mentioned you were living down in the Old Market, so you saw the need. But what was it about the Old Market and that area, that neighborhood specifically, that made you think, hey, I think this whole bodega thing, I think that this could work?
Yeah. When we're thinking about like our target like customer, really, it was us, people working in service industry downtown and whatnot. And there's so many bars and restaurants and not a lot of places for all these service industry workers to like go and grab something quick. And another thing that really attracted us to us was just the amount of hotels and the more transient people just coming in for work for a week or not, to grab some things during their stay. So living there, seeing the need was really the big driver of that.
So I'm just fascinated because your stores offer such like a wide variety of products. I mean, you can come in and get ice cream and frozen pizza, wine, protein bars, cake, like you mentioned, a sandwich, a bottle of water, a bottle of wine. I mean, toothpaste, shampoo, like just a wide variety of things. Like you said, so many just real convenient things. But for you as a store owner, how do you figure out what that inventory is going to look like? How do you say, well, do we need chocolates? Do we need deodorant? Do we need alarm clocks? Like, I can't even imagine just trying to take like everything that someone might want downtown and being like, okay, we've got this little space. What do we put into it? How do you decide what goes in there?
Yeah. Well, we listened to our customers a lot, and it was a lot of trial and error in the beginning, to figure out what the community really needed there. So we listened to our customers. We have feedback QR codes, in the store that maybe items people want to see or whatnot. So, and then, really I have to give a lot of that credit to the staff. We have pretty good employee retention. They get to know those customers, and they're able to like get that information from them and like pass the feedback.
What were a few things that maybe you didn't anticipate early on that you thought you didn't think that you would need, and then you got a lot of customer feedback where it was like, oh, I'd really like this, and now it's in your store?
Yeah. It's so funny because, sometimes I think I'm like really honed in on like our customer, and then I'm like, oh, this thing is going to like fly off the shelves, and I like bring it in and it doesn't pop off like I thought. And then literally sometimes the opposite, one of my managers will order something and I'll be like, and it's like crazy popular. Something that surprised me was actually Mia with Oso Kitchen. She had reached out about getting her cakes in the store, and I was like, I don't think people are coming to Bodega for birthday cakes, but, I was like, well, let's try it out. We try to work with local as much as possible. So we brought them in and they were a huge hit, so I would say that's one that really caught me off guard.
That was a pleasant surprise for me too, because I mean, A, cake is awesome. I love cake.
Yeah.
But B, like I was aware of her, but the only way that I really knew how to get Oh So Good Kitchen's products was down at the farmer's market. And I don't know, when I'm at the farmer's market, I don't want to be carrying around a cake for the next hour.
Yeah.
So I remember coming into Bodega for the first time and I saw it, and it's not like a giant birthday cake, but it was like a little mini one that my wife and I could actually like handle together. And I was like, this is awesome. I can get one of these here. I had no idea walking in that I was going to be buying cake today. And here I am leaving the convenience store with an ube cake.
Yeah, I know. I think, we really cater to those like last minute customers as well. Like we added greeting cards maybe like a year or so, after customer feedback, and like little gift bags for wine, which are both really popular. People grabbing last minute gifts, going to birthday dinners, etc. So.
Okay, so again, getting into inventory and selection, because this is just so fascinating to me, because you guys aren't a grocery store.
Correct.
If you decide, hey, we want to have like barbecue potato chips, you go into Hy-Vee, you can have 8 or 9 different options up on the shelves. You guys don't have that. You guys might have 1 or 2. So with all these options, if you say we want to have barbecue chips, or we want to sell toothpaste, or we want to sell chocolates, you have all these options. How do you decide what's the one chocolate we're going to sell at this store?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we are really trying to be like in the middle between like a 7-Eleven and a Whole Foods. So, you can get a Diet Coke and a pack of cigarettes, and then you can also get a local birthday cake and a really nice kombucha and farm-raised eggs and whatnot. So we try to have something a little bit more entry-level and something a little bit higher end to give customers the option, and we do a lot of testing as well. So,
how do you test?
We just open it up and eat those barbecue chips.
Okay, I didn't know if it was like customer test. You're talking, you actually do the testing of the products yourself.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Fair enough. That was a stupid question.
That's all right.
I love already that you brought up Oh So Good Kitchen, because one of the things that struck me the first time that I visited, and one of the things that attracted me to come back time and time again, is you guys support local so well. I mean, I'm just thinking back to my most recent visit. I saw cakes from Oh So Good Kitchen, chocolates from Nibs Chocolate. There was produce from Long Walk Farm. You're serving amateur coffee. There is carbonara pasta sauce. And that there was more than just that too. I think there was a Viva Fit kitchen meal, stuff like that. What makes you so passionate about showcasing local products?
Yeah, those are some great ones. Also, Grove is a really big one.
Yes.
The Grove juice is huge for us, and our Sweet Magnolias pastries. We want to just work with local as much as we possibly can, and we support them and they support us, and everybody, like literally everybody local we've worked with has been a dream, and we've had really successful partnerships and enjoyed working together.
How do those relationships form? Are most of them like the one that you mentioned with Mia from Most Good Kitchen, where they're approaching you, or are you getting referrals from someone else, or are you being like, ooh, Sweet Magnolias, I've had their scones, those are bomb, let's see if we can get those in here? What do those relationships look like?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a combination, really. It's a lot of people reaching out, especially in the beginning. I was very new to the food and beverage industry. I spent 15 years in the salon industry before this, so I didn't feel like I fully had my finger on the pulse of all the amazing local makers that we have. So a lot of times them reaching out, a lot of times customers telling us about stuff. So those are really the main ways.
Okay, I didn't know your background before this right now, so I'm so curious. I've heard so many people over the years complain about how there's no grocery store downtown.
Yes.
And
oh my gosh, it's such a topic.
There's nowhere to go shop. We got to drive 10 or 15 minutes to the nearest grocery store. But most people stop at that. They stop at complaining. And then they go somewhere else and they get their groceries.
Yeah.
You were one of the few, if only people, to actually act on it and be like, you know what? No. I think I can bring that here.
Yeah.
But you didn't have any or very much experience in the food and beverage industry. What made you confident that not only that the area needed this, but that you were the one to bring it?
I think it was from my experience. I lived in New York City for a couple of years, and my neighborhood bodega was like a fabric of my everyday life, So I think having that experience, I just really felt like Omaha was going to like it, and they were going to use it. So
when you compare Godega to those New York bodegas, like, I'm sure they're not identical. What are the main similarities and differences, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, there is quite a few differences. Of course, I had to put a little bit of our own spin on it, so
sure.
I would say it's a little bit more upscale than your average bodega in New York City. We definitely have a lot more local stuff than you'd usually find, at a bodega in a larger city. The similarities you're going to find are like the convenience. We also try to be in convenient locations as well. Convenient location, hours of operation, and also having a little bit of everything. You're going to be able to find some grab-and-go food. You're going to be able to find some chips. You're going to be able to, get a coffee, etc.
Okay, so I want to focus kind of on that aspect of it. As you're designing the restaurant, you want to create a space where if there's somebody who just ultimate convenience, they forgot something or they need a snack or whatever, they're coming in and they're just grabbing something and going. And then you've kind of got the coffee shop crowd, which is, sometimes that can be come in and grab something and go, but that can also be, hey, I'm going to come work remotely here for a couple hours, or I'm going to come meet a friend here. We're going to share coffees. Those are two very different, atmospheres.
Yeah.
And you have to bring them together in one space and make it feel comfortable for everyone. So the person who's speeding up doesn't feel like they're interrupting the people drinking their coffee. So the people drinking their coffee aren't like, oh, I got these, I can't concentrate because I got people running around. How did you, and I'm going to give you credit. I'm going to say it's pretty seamless because every time I've been in it, it feels like it just works. How did you seamlessly bring those two elements together?
Yeah. Well, Going back a little bit just to your comment about like the grocery store and being downtown, I like that you said that because that is definitely a challenge. What you're mentioning here, like we had at first was the concept being newer to Omaha. There was a lot of people that are like, it's not a coffee shop, it's not quite a grocery store, it's this hybrid thing, and it took a little bit of time to really like flush out that education. Also, Godega's evolved a lot over the years, and it's evolved a lot from really what the original idea was, and that evolvement came from like listening to our customers. Initially the name Godega was a spin on Bodega, but it was just supposed to be grab and go joint. Pretty much no seating or very, very minimal. And you can see that in our downtown location. There's quite a bit of minimal seating inside. But we listened to the customers and added more seating inside, and then as well as like added that patio to give people some seating options based on what they want. And, I think we made some adjustments then when it came time for the Exarban location, having a little bit more of like a seating cafe area and then a little bit more separate convenience area.
Especially given your experience with bodegas and that they are so grab and go. It's, you're not in there for more than 5 or 10 minutes. It's a very quick transaction.
Mm-hmm.
Were you surprised at that feedback from customers that they wanted a chance to chill out inside?
Yeah, definitely was. And, honestly, a big way it changed like really from the original idea is like coffee was always in the plan, but it wasn't a huge part of the plan, if that makes sense. But the coffee was popular, the menu expanded. We had no breakfast sandwiches in the beginning. It was just the pastries, and that's listening to the customer is really important to us when it comes to this concept that just has such a wide variety of items.
This is fascinating to me. I'm going to try and figure out a way to articulate my question in a smart way.
Yeah, you got it.
So, I mean, I'm sure you get customer comments all the time on, oh, I wish you carried this, or I wish you, had this type of seating, something along those lines. And you can't listen to all of them.
Yeah, that is very true.
Because if you listen to all of them, you're going to, it's just impossible. So, how many customers have to say something about, hey, I wish that there was, more of a coffee shop feel? Like, for you to change your entire concept based off, not entire concept, but that's a big adjustment based off customer feedback. I mean, how hard was it for you to come to that decision?
A lot of these sorts of decisions, like expanding the coffee and whatnot, didn't necessarily come from like customer feedback, but it just came down to the numbers and, seeing where the revenue was coming from and how popular stuff was. And, we kind of made a lot of our adjustments according to that. And you're right, you can't listen to like every single thing. I do feel like being a convenience store and having such a wide range of options, it gives us a little bit more flexibility, maybe listening a little bit more. But yeah, and then we just like refined from there, really.
Okay. Well, this is a food podcast, so we got to talk about food.
Let's talk about food. Breakfast
sandwiches. You guys do a bacon, egg, and cheese, a sausage, egg, and cheese, and a vegan breakfast sandwich. How did you determine, of all the food that we could offer, this is going to be, breakfast sandwiches are going to be our main way to feed people?
Yeah. It became clear maybe after about 6 months or a year, we need a hot breakfast item. Just thinking back to like the brand core, efficiency is, really important to us. People going to work, people get in and out quickly if they want to. So we just operate out of like a Turbo Chef oven, one of those hybrid type ovens, and the cooking time can be really quick. So, we tested out some larger like breakfast burritos and whatnot, but we found like the temperature kind of inconsistent, and we just kind of found that these breakfast sandwiches were the best for us, at least right now, for our hot breakfast items.
Were they a hit right away when you introduced them?
Yeah, the sausage breakfast sandwich is one of our top SKUs, like definitely.
What? I don't want to mean this in like in a condescending way at all, but I was actually, when I had it, I was really surprised with the quality of the breakfast. Pleasantly surprised. Not that I didn't think it wasn't going to be good, but I was like, well, I'm not in a restaurant. This is more of a convenience thing. It's not supposed to be gourmet or anything like that, but there's a lot of thought that goes into that sandwich. I mean, you guys have the dressed greens, you have the Gouda, Gouda
Smoked
cheese
Gouda.
on there. Yes, a lot of people just throw American cheese on there. As you're conceptualizing the breakfast sandwich, and how are we going to put this thing together? So, we're not just throwing somebody something that they'd get at McDonald's or whatever. We're going to make this a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more elevated. How did you craft these sandwiches?
Yeah. I think sometimes coming into an industry without any experience, oddly enough, can work in your advantage. You don't have like filtered goggles on or anything. And I have been and still am like very, very open to listening to like our vendors, and a lot of them have chefs on staff, and I listened a lot and work closely with our vendors to like develop these together. So,
Is that a skill that you've always had, just being very open to listening?
yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, two ears, one mouth, right? Like, isn't that what they say?
Well, that's not how most people act.
That's true. That's very true.
But that's a common theme that you've brought up time and time and time again. Is just, we listen to customers. I listen to our vendors. I listen to my staff. I think that that's so important, especially, I mean, for anyone in life, but especially when you're coming into a new industry, to say, you know what? Yeah, I might be the owner here, but I don't know. There's so much here that I don't know, and I need help. I want to hear your opinions. That's very empowering, I think, for people to hear. Whether it's a vendor who's like, oh, this person's actually going to make a breakfast sandwich based off what I say, or a customer who says, man, I would really love to see greeting cards in here. That would be so much more convenient. And they come in a week later and, oh, there's greeting cards I'm listened to. I think that that's such a valuable trait. And yes, you say two ears, one mouth. It's absolutely true. I don't think a lot of people exercise that, though.
Yeah. I really feel that, how do I want to say this? Like, coming into, I think as a leader, really, it comes down to like, if you don't know, you don't know. And asking the questions and learning, because things get messed up real quick when you pretend like you know stuff and you don't know stuff, So I've just kind of found that to be like the best path forward for us.
Okay. Talk to me about the seasonal menus with coffee, cocktails, and other drinks. Who comes up with those?
Combination of me and the team, like it always starts with, a group Slack message to everybody like, yo, working on, the menu, throw me your ideas, and people throw out numerous different ideas. One of them that was thrown out when I sent out that Slack message was the Vietnamese cold brew, one of our baristas like threw out, which has been one of our big sellers on this like new menu that we came out with. So it starts there, and then it moves, to sourcing ingredients, ordering those, and then we test the recipes. And we really try to break it down into three sections. Our coffee drinks, which we usually have about 4 seasonal ones there. Not coffee, which have about 3 or 4. And then our cocktails, which are about 3 or 4 different drinks as well.
So if everybody's just throwing out ideas in this Slack conversation, how do you whittle that down? I mean, I don't know how many ideas you come up with, but let's say that there's 30. How do you whittle that down to hey, here are the 7 or 8 that are going to be on our fall 2025 menu?
Honestly, most of them get tested usually. I do weed out some of them right away in the beginning if they're like too similar, or I don't feel like really fit the season or the brand. But a lot of them get tested. And we test them, ice, test them hot, whatever. Make sure if it's to-go cocktail, we have the right packaging for that and whatnot, and as well as the glassware to stay. So those are all things that we really take into consideration when it comes to launching our new drinks.
Now, I've had people on this show, even recently, lifelong baristas, career-long bartenders, and they've talked to me just about it amazes me the amount of skill and expertise it takes to craft a smart, thoughtful, balanced cup of coffee, especially, if it's a latte or a seasonal drink. Same with a cocktail. Like I'd never really thought about how nuanced these things are. These people are essentially chefs. They're just not
Yeah.
creating food. They're creating coffee and alcohol. Well, not creating alcohol, but you know what I mean. I'm just sounding
They're
like
making it. Yeah, they're making that cocktail.
You admitted like you don't have a lot of experience in the food or beverage industry. How did you guys, and I'm sure this is a team effort, it's not just you, but how did you guys kind of teach yourselves how to create awesome drinks without, having careers in being baristas?
Yeah. I really have to do a big shout out to Jacob and Jasmine at Amateur Coffee as far as that goes, and the months leading up to the Old Market location opening, we had decided to go with Amateur, as our coffee roaster. And Jasmine, who's one of the owners as well, I knew her from the salon industry because that's where she used to be, which is how we kind of came connected. And I was like, if we're going to open the store, I got to learn more about coffee. And I was like, texting Jacob, I was like, can I come shadow you for a shift? Can I, this, that? And I just harassed him until he let me shadow him, and he stayed late one night and gave me a full class on everything. And we went through equipment, we went through brewing styles, and, so I really just found the people to teach me.
The irony in that you learned from a company called Amateur.
Yeah, right.
So what were some of the most important things that you learned in those crash sessions?
Oh man, a lot of it equipment. To be honest with you, I learned a lot about espresso machines and grinders, and as well as brewing and the appropriate grind, and different beans and where can they be sourced and washed or unwashed. So we really covered a wide variety of topics.
Are you from Omaha originally, or how did you end up here?
Yeah, I grew up in northern Iowa,
okay.
But I've been here most of my adult life.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you co-founded this with a man named David Kerr. How did you guys meet?
Just so you know, we met, and then we were dating, and then we kind of had this idea, and then launched it from there. So,
how did that come up in conversation? Because I can't even imagine just having an offhanded conversation about something like that, and then actually bringing it to fruition. That idea is so exciting.
Yeah, I think, and I could be wrong about this, but there was a lot of people downtown that just talked about how this was needed. And we talked about how it was needed whenever we just wanted to grab a bottle of wine or, something quick. So, that's, once everything slowed down with COVID, I feel like it really opened up a lot of time for those conversations. There was less social commitments. There was lots of walks outside, lots of outdoor time, walking the Old Market when everything was shut down, and which kind of created space for those conversations to happen.
And I've said this many times on this podcast, and I'll continue to say it, for all the just terrible crap that happened during COVID, one of the few good things that came out of it is it did create that time and space for people. And I can't tell you how many people I've had on this show that launched their restaurant or their startup or their concept because during COVID, they actually had time to sit down and be like, I've always wanted to open a barbecue restaurant.
Yeah.
What would it look like if I actually did that? I've always wanted a food truck. Okay, now I have some time. Let's start actually thinking about the logistics that go into this. When did it really start to seem real to you? I mean, it's one thing to, to have conversations or to have an idea in your head where it's like, man, it would be so great to have a convenience store downtown. But to actually have those start to solidify and be like, yeah, I think I'm going to do this. When did that kind of come into your head?
Honestly, it was probably on one of those COVID walks through the Old Market, and I'm not for sure how long the space was available, but as soon as we saw that space on the corner, and this idea of the corner store and being really the fabric of a neighborhood, and it was really once we saw that spot, it started to become less of the chat about idea, and we were like, that's the spot Godega needs to be in.
And what made that spot perfect?
Being on the corner, being centrally located, and we did do some stuff to the space, but really we just fell in love with the hardwood floors and the ceilings, and just thought the space was beautiful on its own.
Now, obviously, we've talked a bunch about how this was something that was needed. A lot of people have said for years that it was needed. But at the same time, the concept of a bodega is very new to Omaha. You're really the only one who's done it. And in 2020, going into 2022 when you opened, if you asked, man, I don't even know, if you polled Omahans, how many of them could even tell you what a bodega was. What made you so confident that Omaha would understand this and that it would work?
Probably delusion.
Delusion is a strong thing. It's good to have.
Maybe being a little bit out of touch as far as that goes, because sometimes I think we can all be guilty of like having a little bit of tunnel vision, and you see that vision so clearly, and it was surprising to me though. Really, I feel like it took a good year to kind of like explain to people who we were and how we worked, and not a coffee shop or not a grocery store. So I would say that was a challenge for us in the beginning, was that education curve for people, and kind of like what to expect.
Mm-hmm. How did you start to bridge that gap? I mean, is it just something that comes with time, or were there certain conversations that you feel like you had with people that really resonated, or talking points? Like what was it that kind of got people over the hump and be like, okay, I get it now, and I love this thing?
Yeah, I really think it was time. Really just like getting more people in the door, more people experiencing it, talking to more of our customers and whatnot. I really think that's what contributed to it.
Okay, so you decided to go for it in 2020. You opened in February 11th of 2022. And I found a quote from you that said it was a long process getting this place open.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that. Why was it a long process?
Lots of permits, historic building, that sort of stuff. I want to say we started meeting with contractors and whatnot summer of 2021 then, is kind of how that ball started rolling. And long process from for me being like new to food and beverage, and I was even like asking the health inspector to like have meetings. I was like, teach me everything, that like it needs to happen here. So I feel like that's why it took a little bit of time, as well as like electrical, for example, in that space. Like these buildings are so old, it did not have, the electricity needed for an espresso machine and freezers and fridges and whatnot. And, we had to pull from nearly a block away, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like through the passageway and whatnot to get the electrical that we needed in there. I know, we just love the space, though. I was like, we're going to make it work. So that's kind of what contributed to that timeline a little bit.
How do you, as you're crafting the space and building out what it's going to look like, how do you kind of blend that historic charm? And I know part of it is forced upon you because you're not allowed to make some renovations, but how do you blend that charm of what the old market is and that these buildings are so old while also modernizing them, updating them, making them a place that people are excited to come into? Like, old market buildings to me don't scream quick convenience. They make me think of like, a restaurant. I'm going to go like a La Bouvette. I'm going to go sit there for 2 hours, or like a bookstore that I'm going to go read in or something. How did you take that space and blend the charm that comes with it being in an historic old market building, but still kind of modernize it and bring it into the present?
Yeah. We, with the old market location, we really just like leaned into the history. We didn't change the floors, we didn't change the ceiling, we didn't change, the gorgeous brick walls or anything like that. So we really kind of just like left that stuff intact and focused on being a little bit more modern with our product choices. And then when it came to Exarban Village and having that gorgeous, HDR building and a much more modern space, there we kind of like leaned a little bit more into the modern style that was going on there.
Okay, so February 11th, 2022, that's your first day open. What memory pops to the front of your brain when I bring up that date?
The memory that comes to my brain is, first of all, being very tired. And also, there did come a point where we were like, not everything was done, but we were like, where do you find this balance between like getting it open and refining, and just like going with it or trying to make it perfect before you open? I remember a couple things. I remember being very busy, even though it probably wasn't even that busy, but it was all new to me. So it felt like a ton of work, getting used to everything still. And I remember actually we had received a few smaller orders, but our biggest grocery supplier couldn't deliver until that Friday opening day. So we didn't want to push it till the next Friday. So we're like, let's just go for it. And then I remember us having this ginormous grocery order on opening day, and I didn't have a concept of like dollar amount and like how much wholesale groceries that is. Does that make sense? So I remember lots of putting away, inventory and whatnot that day.
One of the common refrains that I hear from usually restaurant owners, but just business owners of any kind, is they have that big opening day, and whether they're super busy or they're just exhausted figuring everything out for themselves, they go to bed at night and they're just like, oh, we did it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that realization that, oh, we got to get up again and do this again tomorrow. And then we got to do it the next day. Did you have a similar feeling to that? Or what was, as you kind of like downloaded from that first day, what were your emotions like?
Yeah. It's so, that's a really good question, because I feel like when opening a business, there are so many goalposts, and then like you get to the goalpost, whatever that may be, maybe getting your permits, maybe finishing construction, opening day, or, soft opening. And your brain is like, oh, I hit this goalpost, time to relax. But it's like, no, actually time to keep going harder. But I would say, that feeling of like after that first day was, we're just like getting started with this. So I think that's just important to remember through the whole process.
What were some of the most important things you think you learned in the opening weeks of Godega being open?
Yeah, I would say the most important thing that we learned was that we needed to always focus on consistency. Even at opening day, I didn't have any recipes written down for any drinks. It was a little bit freestyle. It is very standardized now, for making sure we have consistency across the board. But that was very clear in the beginning. I was like, oh, we have to, definitely hone this in a little bit.
Now that you have experience in hindsight, is it crazy just to think back and like look at some of that stuff and be like, oh yeah, I accepted a huge grocery order on the first day that we were open, or oh yeah, we were serving drinks and didn't have the recipes written down for them. I mean, are there any other things like that where you're just like, what was I doing? I'm so glad that I learned from that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there was just like so many mistakes that were made, and thankfully, I felt doing the Exarban Village location was, first of all, so much faster. I mean, from signing the lease to opening was 87 days. It was quick, so it was nice. The time I had to spend in the beginning researching equipment, I didn't have to do all that. Researching vendors, that was all done. I don't remember your question. Am I even answering it anymore?
You are answering
okay.
it. Yeah, no, you did a great job.
Yeah, so I would say those are some things, that I learned and we're able to move a lot quicker. A big thing for us come this Exarban Village location as well is like we learned we needed to lean more into our like grab and go food, grab and go salads, sandwiches, snack boxes, and those sorts of things. So we really focused on the kitchen space to make sure we had that for production when it came time for that next location.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that next location. It opened, like I said, this spring, I believe. Mm-hmm. It was May of 2025.
Yeah.
So about 3 years and change after. At what point did a second location start entering your mind?
Yeah, I would say maybe about 2 years in or so, it started.
And you mentioned earlier, like you guys were very deliberate about where you wanted to put these. You wanted to have that good neighborhood community feel. Obviously exists in the old market. I would say similar in Exarban. But what, as you looked around Omaha, and maybe you honed in on an Exarban right away, you can correct me. But like, what made you say Exarban is our place, not Benson, not Blackstone, anything like that, but Exarban, that's where we want the second Godega to be.
Yeah. It was definitely, Blackstone and Exarban Village were those kind of like two main places, that came to our head when a second location was being discussed. And Exarban Village, I was really interested in all of the corporate offices around there. In the old market, we don't really have that. So I liked that about Exarban Village. And then also UNO and the students. That's a lot of our clientele downtown and whatnot. So I thought that also was what would make it a good fit. I also learned from the first location about maybe finding a space that was second generation, that was set up for food and beverage previously versus taking a shoe store and making it food and beverage is a lot easier. So when we looked at that space, it was just like clear that that was the path forward.
So what were some of the advantages that that space had? I believe it used to be a soup or a sandwich shop.
Yeah.
I think it was. What was it about that space that made it easier than transforming an old shoe store?
A lot of the plumbing and electrical was done. That was a big part of it, so that made things a lot easier, as well as the kitchen was all set up and whatnot. So,
and you kind of just touched on this in your answer a minute ago, but the clientele in Exarban and in the old market are very different. You're getting some Creighton students down in the old market, but you're getting a lot more college students, probably a lot more corporate workers, businessmen and women in Exarban versus, people who are living downtown in the old market. How have those, balancing those two markets, how are they similar? How are they different?
Yeah, good question. Similar, I feel like our customers actually can be quite a bit similar. The big difference that we notice, and this comes back to that listening thing, right? It's you want consistency between the locations, but you also have to have a little bit of that flexibility to make sure it meets the neighborhood needs, I feel, when it comes to a concept like this. So we actually just started opening at 7 a.m. in Exarban Village. That was a big request we had. I think people heading into work at 8 and whatnot. Yeah. So it's definitely more of a morning vibe over there. And the old market is definitely more of an evening vibe. So interesting.
Have you noticed any big differences in buying patterns between the two locations?
We don't have a ton of data yet for Exarban Village. But something we've noticed that doesn't sell as well in Exarban Village as does downtown is soda, which was kind of surprising to me. But we saw a lot more in Exarban Village, a lot more of the kombuchas, a lot more Grove juices, and that sort of stuff.
Exarban's a bunch of hippies. They don't want sugar.
They want
their healthy stuff.
You gotta have a little variety.
I suppose so. How did you develop your Godega's social media voice?
Yeah. A lot of trial and error. And in the beginning thinking I could do it all myself, but it really, we wanted to just keep it modern, keep it fun. My kind of rule when it comes to social media is it should be either educational or entertaining, and I kind of try to phase out content if it doesn't kind of meet one of those two categories. So that's kind of how we make decisions when it comes to stuff.
Looking back, I just found it very interesting. You go back to the early days of your social media game when you were in the old market, and it was a lot of showcasing products and saying, okay, hey, we've got a new offering. We have this brand of protein bar now, whatever it might be. These are delicious. And now it's just, I find your social media to be irreverent.
Now it can be a little unhinged, but fun.
I was gonna say fun and playful. Unhinged is probably the best word for it. It's following TikTok trends, but making blending Godega's personality into them. So many restaurant brands or coffee shop brands are just so buttoned up, and they maybe post a picture of their food and say, hey, here it is, come eat it. And I don't think that there's any problem with that, but you guys have taken a different approach, and you're a little bit out there, and I think it works.
Yeah.
I don't think it would work for everyone, but I think for your distinct brand and what you're trying to do with Godega, I think it works.
Yeah, thank you. We have a lot of fun with it. We usually get together and shoot content. We have these amazing girls that help us with it. It's a company called Louise and Marie. Every 2 weeks we shoot, content for an hour or two. And we brainstorm before and come up with ideas and, some of them trends, some of them original. And that's kind of like how our process goes as far as that.
I love it. Actually putting some thought into social media.
And it's so funny. If you did scroll back on that, you definitely see a difference in the engagement from when we were trying to be more product focused versus when we shifted to be entertaining or educational, so. Mm-hmm. And, just like the numbers don't lie, that tells the story, and once we saw those engagement numbers, it's like people are responding to this, let's like keep going in this direction.
Mm-hmm. When you look at the future of Godega, what do you see?
Yeah. When I look at the future, I see us continuing to build our rapport with customers and, being established in, these more densely populated neighborhoods. I can see, another location in Omaha possibly in another densely populated neighborhood, to try to serve as many people as we can.
I'm not putting your feet to the fire with this and like whatever you answer saying, okay, the next Godega is going in here, but are there any neighborhoods or areas of town that particularly interest you?
I like currently, I think what Blackstone has done over the years and whatnot is really cool. And I used to live in that neighborhood, and like a lot of the developments that have happened over there. More long term, I'm really curious to see what happens with the builders district that they're kind of starting on downtown. I think there's a lot of cool stuff planned, and I'm really excited to see how that like development comes to life.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and yeah, that's right off Creighton's campus. It's gonna be fun to see where that goes. I hope that you guys continue to have enough success that you can open a third location wherever you want to. I got 2 more questions for you here, Nate, and these are things that I ask just about everybody that comes on the podcast. I'm very interested to hear your answers because you're not a restaurant owner, which makes you different, and you had very little experience in the industry coming in, which also makes you very different from most of my guests.
Yeah.
So here's the first one is this. What is something about the restaurant, hospitality, service industry that you feel like most of your customers or guests don't understand, but you wish they did understand?
Good question. Sometimes I feel like, that the numbers really drive a lot of decision making, when it comes to like the hours operation or whatnot, so I guess maybe sometimes I just wish that there is a lot of time that goes into a lot of these, decisions. It might just look like a protein bar or this or that, and we're like always open to feedback, but like we do spend a lot of time, thinking about our actions and the impact that it makes. So and maybe they do know that.
Sure. And then to get you out of here on a positive note, what is your favorite thing about now being a part of the hospitality, restaurant, coffee shop, convenience store industry?
Hands down, it is like community and all the new people, I guess, that I've met. Those kind of like go together. There is, at least in my experience, not like a ton of like competitiveness. It's like a ton of helping each other out. We've like ran out of lids before, and I've like hit up Urban Abbey, even downtown, another coffee shop like a block away, and they're like, yeah, we got you,
Really?
Like there's this like, at least in my experience, just like a welcoming and lack of competitiveness in a good way,
I love that. Well, this is my opportunity to plug Godega because I got to admit, the first time I came in, I thought it was going to be, kind of like gas station convenience store plus, where it would be nicer products, but
was Exarban the first one you went to, or was it Old Market? Or
it honestly was Exarban, and then I since have gone to Old Market a couple times. So I knew that it had a good reputation. I knew that it was established and everything, but I was like, oh, this is going to be, just grab and go, whatever. And I was like, whoa, no, I can see myself coming in here and grabbing a Sweet Magnolia's scone and chilling with a coffee for a couple hours, or they have like actual meals and frozen pizzas and like all kinds of stuff in here. People, Godega is a really cool place. So if you like live in the Exarban area or If you're downtown and you need something, yes, this is a great place, but it can also be a destination. Like, I've gone to Godega purposefully, like even when I wasn't in the area, several times. Go check it out. It's really awesome. Either location, Old Market or in Exarban. Nate, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun, so I appreciate it.
Omaha, as always, thanks for eating with us.